All right, we're going to be talking about the false external perception of the tech industry. And what I mean about that is that there's a lot of thoughts from the outside community that I'm not smart enough to get into the tech industry, or I could never do that. You're way smarter than I am. And that's just not true. And I think we're going to elaborate on that today. My name is Justin Wheeler, and I'm a senior software developer. I currently work for a company called Bravo LT. Claire, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Claire Borden, and I am a senior BI developer with Purdue University. And in my free time, I am on the 100 Devs stream team, teaching folks to code from zero to full stack web dev.
My name is Alexandra White. I am a senior technical writer at Google covering the privacy sandbox and just trying to make things more accessible and more human-friendly in our content. Jen?
My name is Jen Robison. I'm a senior software engineer with a focus and passion for React Native mobile development, and currently getting ready to start a new staff mobile engineer position for Imagine Pediatrics.
Nice.
My name is Nikima Prophet. Nikima Prophet. I'm a developer advocate at PayPal, and I come from the community and want to get back to it.
And last but not least, my name is Youre Ford. I'm a developer advocate at Auth0 by Okta. I work there focusing on emerging developers, helping them do better at coding and helping them learn how to secure their web apps using Auth0. Yes, and I'm very excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah.
Great. So I can share one experience where I try to explain something I'm doing in my tech job to my wife, and she just like immediately zones out because she doesn't think that she's capable of grasping the things that I'm trying to explain to her in the tech industry. But I think that she is able if she tries. So have you seen that in your life?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that has gotten me into developer advocacy is I've been kind of obsessed with this idea that you can explain something highly technical in a way that anybody can understand.
Yeah.
That is always my goal, is to fundamentally understand something well enough to be able to explain it to anyone, whether or not they have a technical background. I think if I can do that, that means I'm really good at my job. So that's always my goal.
Yes, please, yes. More of that, yes. As the technical writer, please, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like you say, that really shows mastery when you can, take a concept and break it down into the simplest parts, and then, really fundamentally cover each of those parts to the point where anybody can grasp it. And as far as, encountering that sort of that feeling of somebody, zoning out because they think they can't quite live up to that. I mean, I was that way for a long time. I don't have any CS background at all. I've never taken a single CS class, and it took years for me actually writing code to actually get to the point where I was like, oh yeah, hey, wait, I am actually a developer.
Yeah.
You don't need that CS degree. You don't need really any background. What you need is just make stuff. I mean, that's really it, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I even had to overcome myself. So I was a self-taught, and then I got a degree in IT. So I never did the CS degree specifically. And I worked with a lot of software engineers, right, that had the CS background. So I wouldn't call myself an engineer. And so I think breaking down that perception and being able to share experiences, because at the end of the day, development is about solving problems and being able to communicate, what are the rules and fundamentals of how to work through those problems. And we can share with people, right? How would you approach this problem? Okay, well, this is how you would write that in code.
Right, yeah.
And so you were saying, being able to break that down into simple terms and create analogies of how, relate it back to how we do that in our everyday life. And you don't have to be, a math wizard, and you don't have to have this incredibly,
I'm certainly not.
right? There's people that do that for us, right? I've worked on very highly technical projects.
I want the computer to do my math for me.
I've had statisticians that provide the functions, and you're like, great, I will write the tests that validate that. But yeah, being able to share, like, you don't have to have that, that background and have had all of that time on a computer, what have you, in order to be successful in that job. You just have to have the desire and interest, curiosity to like dive into that.
Yeah.
Who here has a CS degree? Any of us?
Nobody.
Ooh, I love that. I love this. So there's like one proof of concept.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like my coworkers are the same. I think, apologies if any of you are asking this or watching this and I get this wrong, but I believe there's only one of my coworkers actually has a CS degree. The rest are all from different backgrounds, which I think enriches the experience.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
So part of that is how do we combat that misconception that so many people have? I had it for a long time that you need that CS degree. Like, what are ways that we can break that down for people and be like, look, I mean, you have so many skills, no matter your background, anybody can do this. And the more diverse your background is, the more richness you bring to the field overall. So I'm just curious if anybody has any thoughts on like ways that we can combat that.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is to be very loud about that fact.
Yeah.
So talk about it whenever you get the chance to. Like, I'm sure we've all had circumstances or situations when you're talking to a friend who's not in the tech industry, or even someone who is in the tech industry but not on the software side of things, on the engineering side of things, and they're like, oh no, like I don't think I could ever do that. Like,
Yeah.
validating that they absolutely could, and that like this is not as hard as you think it is whenever you get the chance, whenever that like comes up, I think is really important. And then I think a lot of us in some way, shape, or form do some sort of teaching through writing or actually like live streaming or something like that. And when we do those kind of things, it's very important for us to, I think, number one, talk about our own experiences coming from backgrounds where we didn't have a CS degree or where we, started in a different career, things like that. So we are proof that this is the truth. Like, I lived this. This is actually how it happens. And then also, again, just like restating that fact to people you talk to and people you teach, I think is really important.
Yeah.
I think anytime you can share your story,
Yeah.
I have been able to do that a few different times in different ways, presenting at Society of Women Engineers to say, hey, you all might be, SWE and CS majors, but I know specifically, by sharing my non-traditional story in that setting, I had somebody come up to me, and this was back in like 2015. I had a woman come up to me who was in college, had already had one child, and she was like, wow, it's so good to hear somebody else's story and know that I can still like go down this path. Like, I want to have another child. I want to be able to find that balance. I'm like, you absolutely can. I'm not saying it's easy to like go down this road, but you absolutely can. And I found as a director of engineering in one of my last roles, that hiring some of the best candidates that I, found were definitely non-traditional. They went to a boot camp or they self-taught or what have you, because they have a different drive.
Yeah.
And I do think the diversity in their backgrounds and experiences help shape how they approach problems, how they communicate to others, and being able to relate to the users.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's all about like what you're exposed to, right? And I feel like, for so many folks, the only exposure that they get of people writing code is in movies and TV, where it's so exaggerated. You got a guy with 6 keyboards and they're hacking the Pentagon, right? And whereas that's really not what the day-to-day work is. And
You only need one keyboard to hack the Pentagon, okay? That's it.
yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I know that's what I thought growing up, but I didn't know anybody in my life that actually wrote code or did programming or anything like that. And so, when you grow up with your only exposure being TV and movies, you think, wow, those people are magic.
Yeah, I think
That's really not it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, too, that sometimes people in the tech industry tend to perpetuate that, too.
Yes, absolutely.
Because a lot of people like to sound like they're super smart and like, yeah, like I'm a software engineer and I'm smarter than everybody and yada, yada, yada. Like, a lot of engineers can have that, like, God complex, which is, for me, extremely off-putting because it alienates you from them and it makes you feel like I could never do this. So I try very hard not to pick up that kind of language because it can like sneak through in the way that you talk. And I try like super hard not to like fall into that.
I'm actually curious how you respond when somebody said, so like I live in a rural community,
Okay.
very blue collar. And when I tell people what I do for a living, they're like, wow, you're so smart. And I'm like, I'm no smarter than you.
Yeah.
I just chose this career path, right? Like you too could do it. So I'm curious how you guys would respond to somebody that would say that. Or do you even ever get that type of response? Because I feel it's actually uncomfortable for me. I'm like, don't put me on a pedestal. Like I am not any smarter, right?
Yeah. I think sometimes what I try to do is if I have the time, I'll literally tell them how I got here. Because if you explain it out, it's like you could really do, like, this is not as hard as you think it is. Like, I just took a couple online courses and, you know, took a couple hours every night to, like, code something if I could. And when you kind of explain it like that, it's like, oh, that really doesn't sound that difficult, because it's not. And I think, like you said, a lot of people have that perception that we're like in hoodies with like all these like keyboards and stuff, doing all this crazy stuff on the computer. It's essentially just like exposing what it's really like, because a lot of people have that misconception. So I try to tell them, like, listen, this is what I did to get where I'm at. Like, anybody could do it. That's kind of my approach usually.
I wanted to ask for clarification. Are we talking about software engineering specifically, or like the whole tech umbrella?
I would say tech as a whole. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, and most people don't even know the distinctions, right?
Yeah.
They think tech, they see tech, they think coder, but there's
Yeah.
it's such a more varied field than that. So, I mean, I think really anywhere in the tech industry, because a lot of people don't distinguish.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's part of the hesitation that people have, is they think I have to be a coder
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
get into this. And I think I would double down on everyone has a place. Like there's a
yeah.
role for you, and every company is a tech company now. So
Yes.
if you're doing customer service at the Gap, like there's customer service you can do at a tech company. Or the Gap has technology. So like there's like every company is touched by technology, and there's so many different roles that I would just encourage people to find something that they enjoy, like double down on what you do well, and find out where a tech role would align with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do think a lot of people just don't realize how wide, like, how vast the tech industry is. Like, there's so many things you can do. I wish that we were better at, like, educating people about that, because most people really only think about, like, you know, the software engineers and stuff, but there's the developer advocates and the product managers and the technical writers and all that kind of stuff. So there's a ton of things you can do. I always find myself listening to people, like friends or whatever, and they'll be talking about how they don't want to code, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I'll ask them, like, what are the other things that you enjoy doing? And when they tell me, like, oh yeah, you know, I don't like really coding, but I like doing this, that, and the third, and I try to connect the dots for them, because like you said, a lot of people just don't realize how much there is to offer in the tech industry. So yeah.
I would say, too, people might think, like, I've already chosen a career path.
Yeah.
I've decided to do this. If you decided to go to college, maybe you picked a major and it's something totally, you think, outside of the realm of tech. But every skill you learn can be brought into a new career. Like, there's always opportunity to change and pivot. I started my career in digital marketing. I was like, I'm going to tweet for a living, and it's going to be amazing. And I quickly realized, oh, no, I don't want to do this. This is great, but I want to try something else. And I've had 4 different titles, all, you know, loosely associated in communication and narrative, but nobody becomes a technical writer on purpose. You know, it's an accident career. And that's not really true. You know, there are some people who study it and become a technical writer, but a lot of technical writers, you stumble into that role. And I think it's fair, the intimidation of people say, well, then you must know how to code too. You must know all the languages. Nope, but don't.
Yeah, well, and so many people have transferable skills and they don't know it. And I think that's one of that's one of the most surprising things, is like people have these incredible, impressive backgrounds. I work with a lot of folks who are trying to break into tech and do this thing called story crafting, where we essentially help them, you know, craft the narrative of all their combined experience and their past roles, and how those individual characteristics from their past experience is going to help them in tech. Like, and a lot of times they don't know, like folks in the restaurant industry, folks in education, all those bring incredible skills, stress management, time management,
Yeah.
you know, prioritization, ability to work with people. Any customer facing role, like folks coming from those backgrounds, they're going to crush it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you can work well with people, and so that's the sometimes the hardest thing to get across when we're talking about, you know, misconceptions of the tech industry. Folks just don't know how many of their skills are transferable.
Yeah, I think one thing that I know helped me coming from a non-traditional background was that I very quickly learned how to market myself. So when I was like getting my resume together and describing the experiences I had in the past, I figured out like very quickly that the best way to make myself seem appealing to tech companies was to frame my skills in a way that would be applicable to the position I'm applying for. So for instance, like I think one of the things I used to do digital marketing as well. And one of the things that I would do was I obviously worked with clients and people trying to help them like figure out their like digital marketing strategy. So I was really good with strategizing, and I was really good with like empathizing with other people, and like there were all these kind of skills that I gained from doing that definitely helped me do my job today. Like one of my strengths as a developer advocate is I'm very familiar with how marketing works and all that kind of stuff, and it helps a ton. It helps us to be able to communicate with other teams, which is very important no matter like what team you're on. A lot of engineering teams have a hard time collaborating with other departments. And so I was like, I'm really good at that because I understand like where the marketing team is coming from. I can be able to, you know, empathize with them really easily. So it's just about, I think that's a great exercise to have people do who are trying to get in the tech industry, is because it's really about changing your mindset. I've talked with my friends before, and I've like done like resume sessions with them. Essentially, I don't call it that, but that's really what it is. And they'll have like something on their resume that like they're like, oh yeah, no, this doesn't apply at all. And I'm like, yes, it does. Here's why, X, Y, Z. And it's really like a mindset shift, but it really, that's like, that unlocks so much potential and the things you will be able to accomplish if you figure out how to market yourself like that.
Yeah, and a lot of that takes a lot of, you know, a lot of getting into tech requires a certain level of confidence.
Yeah.
And folks don't always have that at the outset. And so we have to try to help them build that confidence in their own experiences to be like, yes, you have worth, you have value, and you can be a valuable contributor in this industry. You know, you can bring your background.
And I think that's something else that I've seen a lot is, you know, everyone is talking about imposter syndrome. And I think normalizing that it's not necessarily imposter syndrome, right? It's just, it's super normal to feel out of your comfort zone when you're starting a new job, when you're starting a new project, when you're joining a new team, like whatever that is. And I try, with the years of experience that I've had, you know, to share with more juniors, especially, like, I still get nervous. Like, I still mess up. I, you know, make mistakes. I think somebody, you know, earlier was talking about live coding and like, does it lose your credibility if you make mistakes? And I said, I actually think it brings the real heart of life, because we all make mistakes. I don't care how long you've been doing this. Technology is ever changing. So whether it's you're talking about it or you're coding it or whatever, like, you have to want to be a learner, right? Like, and evolve with it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how do we encourage people and like pump them up, but also prepare them for maybe the brick wall that they're going to run into when they try to get a job? Because I know it's one thing to say, yeah, anybody can do this, everybody has a role, but then when you go out to look for jobs, it's like, feels like nobody's hiring juniors, or it feels like I'm a woman and that's holding me back, or I'm a Black woman and that's holding me back. So how do you balance that, like trying to encourage people, but also like, heads up, it's simple, but it's not easy, and there are people putting up roadblocks.
Yeah.
I think that side projects can be a great way to do that, you know,
Okay.
or they can remain in their current career because that's what's providing the income, and work on side projects on the side and build that confidence. Like, wow, I built this working application, I built this working website, and use that as like a showpiece to potential employers. Like, hey, I built this. I can help you on your projects too.
Yeah, I think one big thing is that sometimes we get like caught up in the hype of like, it's so amazing, like you can do it, anyone can do it, because that sounds great. Like that's such an amazing thing to say, and people love to hear it. But when things get rough, we tend to fall back a little bit. And I think those are the times when people who are trying to get in the industry need our support the most. So I would say like one of the things that really helps is number one, being a listening ear when they have these struggles, sharing if you've experienced anything else, or even if you know someone who has, like that can go a really, really long way. And it may not be a solution to the problem, but it still helps. Like offering that support helps. And then I think one thing that people should be more open to is when you get up the ladder, pulling other people up.
That's what I was gonna say.
So like you have the ability now that you're here to help other people get in the door as well. You know about the positions your company is hiring for. You know, some of us have influence on who gets hired or how they get hired, things like that. Like you have to use the position you have, the power you have to help other people. And I take that mindset because I know people helped me. So it's like I have to pass it forward. Like I can't not do that. Like I owe the universe and the whoever else that helped me to like make sure that I do that. So
To your point, discrimination is a huge problem. I think there are a lot of companies that are having these conversations about who's included, and we're everybody's included. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your race is or what your gender is. Everybody can be here, but that's not actually how it plays out, and we all know that, and it's really unfortunate. But being aware of that and participating in outreach and trying to create opportunities if you are an opportunity maker. If you don't have hiring power, for example, I have limited hiring power. I've taken on a role of champion, which means that before people get to the interview process, they can have a conversation with me, and I can try my best to prepare them for an interview with Google and be honest, too, about the experiences, because it is not all roses anywhere you go. And finding your community wherever you go, and also feeling empowered to leave when it's not the right space.
I also think that there might be some level of discrimination on both sides. Like I know personally, I don't want to work for every company, and I know a lot of new people want to work for the big names, the Amazon, the Google, the Disney, the Netflix, the companies that have the week-long interview processes, the ones that are the hardest to get into, and they may face difficulties entering the industry trying to shoot for the sky. Maybe they could work at like mom and pop's tech shop to build that experience and real world experience, and then move on after to somewhere better afterwards.
So I guess, talking kind of about like, the idea that it's not, we like to, hype it up because we really enjoy the industry that we're in, but also being pragmatic about it's not always rosy. And in 100 Devs, we have what we call the trough of sorrow, which is where
I love the trough of sorrow.
you go into it and you feel confident at the start because you really don't know what the heck's going on, and you're like, I can do anything. And then as you learn more, you're like, wait, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
And then, what's important is that you're honest about that. Yes, everyone's going to hit that trough, whether it's during the hiring process, whether it's during the learning process. You're going to be in it. Everybody is. It's okay to feel what you feel. And if you keep going with it, you'll start to climb out, and you'll eventually, you'll reach the I guess we could call it the plateau of competency, where you reach a certain point where you start to feel stable, you start to feel secure. And there'll always be uncertainty. It's a part of life. It's a part of work. It's a part of growth, right? If you never feel uncertain, then you're not going to be able to grow. And so, I think just being honest and upfront about that, everyone's going to hit that trough. It's okay. It's normal to feel that way. And also, to your point, increasing awareness that, and like you said, every company is a tech company, right? But most people don't know that. It's just, they hear about Google, they hear about Facebook, they hear about Amazon, because those are in the news. But education about other companies needing tech jobs all the time, more and more every day.
Yeah, I think another thing too is that sometimes when people get to that point where it's like no one's hiring me, they can start to compare themselves to other people.
Oh, yeah.
I think that can happen so often, even like if you're in the tech industry and you're already like here, it can be so easy to do that. And I know earlier we talked about like sharing our experiences with others, and sometimes like people can compare themselves to what you experience or what others experience, because there's a lot of like success stories and not everything pans out that way. But I think the key is to learn from other people's experiences, but don't necessarily compare yourself to them. So you can hear someone's experience and say like, oh, she did this differently, so I'm going to try that. But don't necessarily say, when she was 6 months into her like learning journey, she already had a job and I don't have that yet. Like, you don't want to get into the habit of doing that. That's like a really toxic thing to do to yourself, and it can rob you of joy. It can rob you of your confidence. It can like make your imposter syndrome worse. So that's something you don't want to do, especially at the beginning, but it can even follow you into your career. So and it's hard. It's really hard not to do, but that's something I think we should also really like make sure that people know when they are interested and they get to the point where they're like, they've overcome the initial like misconception about how you have to be a super genius to be in tech. Make sure that they're not like, not make sure, because you can't really control someone else, but like encourage them to avoid comparing themselves to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to elaborate on that. When you like write like a blog post or you share like a project that you're working on, you get like 10, 20 likes. You can't really compare yourself to like the posts that go viral and have millions of likes, or the people that are posted by like CEOs and executives, because it's not really like a fair scale. You have to realize that that's still like 10 or 20 people that have like read your content and liked it or commented or reacted with it, and you should be proud of that, even if it's on that small of a scale, because it's still building up your brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that happens a lot on Twitter. Is folks will post the beautiful, like beautifully designed, images of web pages and apps and things, and folks will be like, they'll be working on something similar, and they're like, well, I should just give up because that's not even that mine will never look as good as that. It's like, no, just you're still building something. What matters is what you built. It's not whether it looks pretty or not. I should know it. I'm not a designer, believe me. If my apps have color, then that's if it has more than one color, then we're lucky. But that comparison is so hard, especially because you just have to remember that social media is always showing someone's best day.
Yes.
It's so
Highlight reel.
It's what? It's
The highlight reel.
Yeah, and that's a thing that I think we also have to keep reminding ourselves and people who are breaking in, is that what you see on social media is someone's highlight reel, right? It's carefully curated.
Yeah.
It's good to share stories about times that you've faced barriers. For example, I was telling a story earlier about a manager I once had when I first became a technical writer. Month 2 of being a technical writer and working at a tech company. And before that, I worked in tech at a non-tech company. I worked at a PBS station.
Oh, okay.
And did web development for them. But I joined this tech company, and I was talking to my manager, and he said, okay, so what's your career path? What do you want to do? And I said, well, I was a web developer. Now I'm a technical writer, and I think I really want to do developer relations. I feel like that's the bridge of all of my skills. And his response to that was, well, I've interviewed a lot of women for developer relations roles recently, and just all of them, all they did was talk about being a woman in tech. I'm not really sure if they would be capable of doing the job.
Yikes.
Yikes. I'm really uncomfortable. How do you respond to that? I didn't have a response to that in that moment. I wasn't prepared. How
do you prepare yourself for that?
I don't think you can.
There's no way.
But here I am. I work in web devrel now.
Yeah. Well, and that's great. I'm glad you shared that, because we just got to get our experiences out there, and show that hey, this might be a bump in the road, but you can surpass it, and so many people have, and but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think you have to let it fuel you, right?
Yeah.
Like I was
Rage
once
fuels
called
me.
I was once called a one-trick pony
Ooh.
by a male boss, and I was like, "Excuse me? What did I show him?" Every once in a while, when I tweet something, my husband was like, "Oh, I know who that was targeted."
Yeah, I think too, like, it's important, if you feel comfortable, to share some of the more like not so great experiences.
Yes.
And it's not like, I used to be afraid of scaring people away, and that wasn't my goal. It was to, number one, make it very clear that like you are not the only one who struggles sometimes. And then also to make it clear that like not everything is going to be sunshine and butterflies for me or for anybody else. So I tried to keep that in mind, that like if these things are uncomfortable to talk about, sometimes they're painful to talk about, but it is important. They are important conversations to have, and I try to have them. I try to work up the courage to have them. It's hard, but I think it's very important to talk about these things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like you don't need to choose like one role or one company and be there forever.
Yeah.
Changing an enterprise company's mindset is extremely difficult and almost impossible from like an individual perspective. I can share my experience when I was at Verizon. I was a developer there for 5 years, and I was performing at a senior level, but they wouldn't make me a senior developer because I didn't have X years of experience on paper. And I could have got that senior position if I stayed there 2 or 3 more years.
Yeah.
But I decided to leave that company, and I moved straight into a senior position that same year.
Oh, cool. Good on you.
So you just have to make those choices, because maybe that the company you're at isn't your forever company.
Yeah.
But also finding sponsorship, like
Yeah.
being able to enter a company. It's hard when you're applying to dozens, hundreds of roles, especially, with everything going on this year.
Yeah.
This is a hard year to try and do tech
Yes.
stuff, to try and change tech jobs. There is stuff, but finding community, finding people who you can go to and ask for advice, finding people in the companies where you want to work, and building relationships. And of course, saying that too, building relationships is not just, hey, can you give me this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if not equal, at least an exchange
Yes.
of communication and resources.
Yeah.
The more you can network, building relationships is so important. From early on in my career, if you can find those that will help pull you up, that will, help advocate for you, but you have to continue to foster those relationships and stay in touch here and there, right? And whether it's in-person events, if that's your jam, or getting on Discord servers or interacting on Twitter, being able to connect with the community and whatever you are comfortable. Because I know I shared earlier today, I'm like, I don't love being on social media. I do it here and there, usually if I'm getting ready for a conference or something, but then I fall off again. And that's okay, because if you curate some of those relationships and really get to know somebody, I have made like amazing friends from these events where you have to be willing to put yourself out there and start a conversation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be, surrounded with tech specific, but just like, hey, where are you from? Like, oh, I'm from this area, or I've been there, whatever. You start a conversation and you build from there. It doesn't have to have an ulterior motive.
Yeah. I have a friend who's in the tech industry, and we bonded over K-pop, which obviously has nothing to do with the tech industry, but those kind of relationships, I don't really see it as like networking, right? Because networking is very much so like, it is what we're doing, but it's also, networking is so businessy and like, this is really like relationship building.
Yeah.
So you talk to people in the tech industry like they're people, and you can bond over like literally anything. I bonded with this person over K-pop, and later on down the line, she was looking for a new role, and I helped her get in the door, get an interview with a company I used to work at. So these are the kind of things that can happen when you invest in people. It's so important to make sure that you invest time in building those relationships with people, and it can be intimidating, but that a lot of times for a lot of people is what makes the difference. Because I know earlier we talked about, and you mentioned this too, we are going to try to pull other people up. If you make the right connections, they're going to try to get you in the door as well. I know that's my goal. That's something I'm always trying to do. So for that reason, it's like so important because, it's so important because it's a very like give and take thing. So tons of people help me. I'm going to try to help other people. I keep, my throat gets stuck a little bit, so excuse me. I'm going to try to help other people. And I hope that the people I help will help other people. So it's like a chain of just goodness. So get in the chain so we can like keep it going.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you all brought up networking too, because that is a misconception. Because people think that all I have to do is learn how to code, and then I will manifest into, you know, a job in the industry. Whereas actually, some of the times the majority component is the connections that you make, and that is, people don't know that.
Yeah.
They don't. And I've encountered several people who they learn to code, and then they don't magically get a job, and so they just learn to do more code, and they keep widening and widening and widening without ever making those kind of connections that are going to give them that leg up and help them get pulled up into the industry. And networking is such a major component of that, and people just don't realize. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
And but it's so important. And I guess, how do we I know that networking is not necessarily a comfortable thing for a lot of people. And so how do we, I guess, demystify that a little bit and make us who are already in the industry, make ourselves more approachable and easier to talk to, and say like, hey, look, I'm a person too.
I love what you said about, you bonded over K-pop.
Yeah.
I literally met this woman last year at a DevOps conference because she had the same name as my daughter.
Oh, wow.
And we have become like friends. We text. It's, you can bond over so many different things that can turn into something else. So it doesn't have to be like, I'm going to meet this person because they work for this company and they might help me get a job. But it really goes back to the relationship, specifically. And you find that common ground and you build from there. And then when you are in a place to be looking or something and you're casting your net, they're there helping you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we like make ourselves, like, broadcast that be like, hey, we're people, talk to us,
Yeah.
I just try to, you have to be approachable, right?
Yeah.
For one, but I try to just put myself out there to put others at ease first. And I think that a lot of people in tech are more introverted. I'm not very introverted. And I think that's actually a misconception, is that everybody is a certain way. And so if that is something you're comfortable with, just trying to be, make the first move.
Yeah, I think too, it goes back to the very beginning of this conversation about like that misconception that, we're so smart. Like I think I mentioned this earlier, a lot of people in the tech industry act like that. Like they genuinely act like they're better than everybody. And if you act like that, there's no way someone who's junior or who's just starting out or trying to get in the industry is going to feel comfortable talking to you. So it really starts with extracting that from your personality, if that's part of it. Like, let's start there. You can't walk around acting like you're God's gift to the green earth. Like, that's not going to work. I think that is like step one, is taking that away. And then, of course, like you said, I think taking the first step is very, very important. And of course, like, all of us have different thresholds for how much we can do socially. Mm-hmm. So choose the avenue that is most comfortable for you. Some people are more comfortable on Discord. Some people are more comfortable on Twitch or at meetups or at conferences. Like, choose your thing that you like and stick with that. And make sure to do outreach if you can, if you're comfortable with that. It could be nerve-wracking for some people. It's not nerve-wracking for me, but for a lot of people it can be. But it can be as simple as, like, you see someone on Discord talking about how they're struggling with XYZ, and you DM them like, hey, I just wanted to give you this tip, or I'm willing to debug with you or pair program with you or whatever. Like, those little things that seem little to us can be extremely impactful for somebody who's just getting started. So it can be, like you said, like taking that first step.
Yeah. And a lot of people like to talk about work that they've done. So if you see a cool blog post or if you see a cool project and you comment on there like, hey, this is really interesting to me. Can you like explain to me how you did this or how you did that? They'll probably be willing to talk to you a little bit more about that. And you can use that to like create a connection with that person. And then maybe you want to build something similar or share like, oh, that was really nice. Do you want to see like what I've been working on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try to be a conduit too for other relationships. Like, I have my set of skills. I like to talk to other people, create a relationship but also say, oh, okay, you're interested in this. I have a friend who also does this. Let me introduce you.
Yeah.
That's the superpower that I can offer of connecting people who are best suited to talk to each other. So listening is really what that is, right? Like I'm listening to the person that I'm talking to and trying to learn more about them and what they're interested in and how I can help them. And, you know, ideally they ask for help, right?
Yeah.
Like I may ask the question, how can I help you? But being direct and getting that information and then connecting the dots. The farther you get in the industry, the more other dots you can connect with.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sometimes forget that you can offer your network to other people.
Yeah.
Because someone who's starting out a lot of times won't have that, but a lot of us do. That's how we got where we are. And so we can offer that to other people, like you said, by connecting them. That's something I tend to forget that I can do. I'm always like, I have to be superwoman and like be able to do everything and help everybody with everything. But you can definitely be like the facilitator, mediator, connector person too.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's not something that I would typically do, but maybe it's something that I'll start doing more of.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the value of working in public or working in public and learning in public? Because I think as a beginner, if you can understand that there's value in my experience, then that can take you pretty far. And like I'm a proponent of learning in public because I think it allows you to gather your cheerleaders. Like, I know I'm on Twitter like this, like, yes, you wrote your first line of code. Yes, you're on day 56 of 100 days of code. Like, I'm cheering for everybody that gets a job. So I think if you have some type of public presence, even if it's like, just like a sentence, I learned how to do this today, or I made this mistake and I fixed it. I think that even helps for those who are more experienced to appear more humanized, because we were talking about making mistakes on a stream. Yeah, they make mistakes too. They're still learning too. So I'm a big proponent of work in public.
I really like that because I know when I was in my director role, we tried to bring on, junior devs and, straight out of boot camp and try to help them get up to speed to work on client work. And one of the things that I found to help those be the most successful was the vulnerability to do that learning in public, right? Like not be afraid to say, I don't know how to do that. You don't have to go be Superman, Superwoman, and work late into the night trying to figure out how to do something because somebody was like, oh, hey, Jen, can you go do this thing? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, I can do that, right? And then go suffer alone and go down this deep rabbit hole where if you had a conversation and just say, I would really like to work on that. I think this is how I might approach it. So you're doing, you're seeking a little bit of advice and having that opportunity to get a little bit of guidance and check in here and there. But I really like that. I think that is what helps people be successful, that willingness to do that.
Yeah.
Also, go ahead.
I was going to say, with so much in the tech industry, like there's so much to learn in so many different avenues, seeing what other people is learning, maybe that'll lead you down a certain path of learning like similar technologies or the same technologies as other people and connecting with those people on that technology.
Yeah, I know for me, my whole career was built off of learning in public. Like I jumped out the door like, I don't know what's going on here on Twitter. Like all the time I was in Discord channels like doing that. And for me, it was easy because I'm pretty shameless, but I think that encouraging people to do that is so important because part of the issue is that we don't know that you're here. Sometimes we don't know that these people are learning because how can we find them? They're sometimes not running in the same circles as us. So when you are learning in public, it puts you on our radar. And that is like invaluable. And that sometimes opens the door for people to reach out to you. So when I was, for myself, a couple years, how long has it been? Like 3 years ago, when I was learning how to code, that was how I started out, right? I was like talking about learning JavaScript and not knowing what a promise was and async and await and all that kind of stuff. And it opened the door for people to reach out to me. Like I've had people reach out to me and like help me or send me articles for things like that, give me coupon codes for courses. I remember once I was just talking on Twitter about how hard it was preparing for interviews, and someone was like, I'll do a mock interview with you. Like, those are the kind of things that happen when you put yourself out there first. And it can be scary for some people, but like, and it can seem like nobody's listening. But if you're consistent with it, if you're holding conversations with people, you know, you can respond to other people on Discord, respond to other people on Twitter, and post your own things. I would hop into people's Twitch streams and like talk to them while they're doing their live coding and things like that. Like, that kind of stuff really takes you so far. I cannot like overestimate the importance of learning in public. It can supercharge your growth, supercharge your career, like, for sure. So I think that is huge. Like, that can help a ton.
Yeah. One of the phrases that we have, like sort of the mottos that we have in 100 Devs is community taught, right? You know, self-taught is maybe a little bit of a misnomer in that, you know, everybody uses resources that were created by somebody else. And so you have to just be comfortable with that, you know, hey, like, it's a collaborative effort. Anytime someone learns to code, it's a success for the entire community. And so if we can embrace sort of that community-minded approach to helping others, to elevating others, like all y'all have said so far, I mean, it's all about just pulling each other up and being vulnerable about the learning experience, and that it doesn't just happen by magic. You're not going to wake up and know how to code. It's incremental and ongoing, and it literally never ends. And that's the great part about it.
We're almost out of time, I think. So, like, I just want to make sure that we all have an opportunity, if there's something that you learned now in this conversation, that you'll change to be able to open the door and help people understand the work that we do. Like, what have y'all learned? Because I feel like I've learned a lot from all of you.
Well, for me, I'm definitely taking home what you said about being the connector. Like, I'm going to really try to do that now, because I never thought about it like that. So that's my little gem that I'm taking home with me.
Yeah, me too. I have like over 3,000 connections on LinkedIn, and I've never thought to lean on that network more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take what you said about sharing your network just overall, like, you know, helping it, like it's sort of like the connection thing, you know, just basically saying like, hey, oh, I know this person, and or oh, here's some, you know, resources that you might find useful, and just sharing not just the coding connections, but the people connections. That's super important.
And I think for me, I want to come back to what Nikema said earlier about tech isn't just about coding. So I know we talked a lot about coding specifically, but it's not just about being a software engineer, right? Or developer, whatever you want to call the role. There are so many pieces to that puzzle to make a project successful, and being able to talk to individuals about what that means and how they could use some of their existing skills and grow those to help in tech.
I just have a comment kind of about maybe minding our language when we're talking to people that we want to encourage, because like, even just like a lot of us in tech say, oh, we're breaking in. Like, that's kind of a P for me personally, just because it feels like I belong here. I shouldn't have to break in to something that I belong. But maybe that's the reality. Maybe the reality is that we're still breaking in, but it makes it like automatically others you to like think of yourself as someone who is up against like opposition. And also, like Youre said, like there are people who act like they are the smartest and the greatest thing on earth, but there are also people that kind of romanticize how hard it is. Like, this is the hardest thing you'll ever do. Like, there was a boot camp person, boot camp CEO that had said something like, this is the hardest thing you'll ever do. I'm like, huh, I've had 2 kids. This is not even top 10 of the hardest things I'll ever do. But it's just like things like, I think being mindful of, it's a balance of like encouragement versus the reality, but I don't know.
Being honest. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a popular like thread, I guess, on Reddit or on TikTok. Like, they explain it like I'm 5, a mindset. And I don't know why the default has to be like I'm an extremely talented coder. So if we just keep that in the minds, like, let me explain this in a non-technical way. And that's a valuable skill because not everyone that you're going to be working with in the tech industry is technical. Like, you're going to have your product managers and your business people that need to understand what you're doing and what you're saying without having a computer science degree or knowing coding.
And use inclusive language while you do it. I'm so glad that you brought up breaking in, because that sort of language, it sticks with people.
Yeah.
And thinking about the words that we choose to define things is really critical. Words matter.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
They do.
Wow. I think that was a really great discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're done?